Great intro. So, overview of what we'll try to touch base on today. Obviously, this is very informal. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask anytime throughout the discussion. We've had our fair share of good and bad race prep experiences. So we just both kind of try to put our brains together and figure out what might be the most helpful information for you guys. We recognize that this is a 5K, and so some of our recommendations may be for races that are a little bit longer as far as kind of hydration and nutrition. But for the most part, everything is kind of applicable to any of the races that you guys are going to do in the future. So we'll talk about weather, hydration, nutrition, race day prep. Is it a good idea to carbo load? Probably not. We'll talk about it. The actual day of the race, what type of strategy you're going to have, running etiquette out on the course, and how to recover most optimally after the race. Okay. Right, so where's the porta potty? We're going to talk about it. Is there a clicker?
Yes.
I thought so. Okay. You just press any button. Ooh, fancy. Okay, so weather preparation. Definitely always wear lightweight, loose-fitting clothing. I think it's a great recommendation to dress like it's about 15 to 20 degrees warmer than it actually is outside. So sometimes you get out there, it's early, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, it's a little bit chilly. You got your hat on, your jacket on, but that gets shed pretty quickly. So if at all possible, try to shed your gear before you get to the start line. You'll probably warm up pretty quickly once you start the race, and hopefully you've kind of gotten to the starting line a little bit sweaty. That's the best case scenario, having already done some type of dynamic warm up and maybe a light jog or a brisk walk. Definitely avoid 100% cotton socks. So has anybody ever experienced blisters or just like...
Even not cotton socks, what I found worked really well for me were double layer socks. That was what finally took care of it.
Yep. Yeah, ever anybody have like toenail issues? That typically happens during the longer races, but always a good idea to manicure your toenails before you race. All right, that random long toenail that's sticking out, might want to take care of it. And definitely work on hydration. So this is a shorter race, probably not necessary for you to be chugging electrolyte drinks beforehand. I would just stick with water, and definitely bring dry clothes for after the race. You're probably going to want to hang out for, half an hour, maybe, a few hours with your friends afterwards. Maybe you wind up going right to lunch or whatever. Always a good idea to have clothes to change into. Any questions about a weather prep? Okay. Hydration. Love The Office. So definitely start hydrating several days before the race. If anybody drinks alcohol, probably a good idea to not do that a few days before the race. I know it sounds crazy, but it's best to kind of be as well hydrated as possible. Your urine should be pretty clear by race morning. If you do wind up exercising for more than an hour, you probably want to maybe have some lighter electrolyte drinks in the days before. Scratch makes, I don't get paid by them, but they make really nice electrolyte powder that doesn't have a ton of added sugar and stuff, and it's just a little bit of light replenishment. Okay. Any Any questions about that one? Good. So eating, definitely do not eat 2 pounds of pasta the night before. I did do that once and it was terrible. So I would probably recommend avoiding spicy foods, fiber. Anything new is probably not a great idea the night before the race, and definitely the morning of the race. Try to stick to lighter foods, maybe just a bagel with some peanut butter or a banana, like definitely something that you've tried before. Old adage is to never do something new on race day or the night before. So just make sure that you're keeping to your standard routine and that you're drinking water. The answer is no. Please don't. The week and the night before, try to get the best sleep possible. If you have a newborn, that may not always be the case, but do your best to kind of turn it in a little bit early, especially a few nights before, because sometimes on race day, depending on what type of race it is, if it's something that maybe makes you a little bit nervous or more anxious, you might not sleep as well the night before, but at least you'll have money in the bank if you got good night's sleep leading up to race day. So, and probably a better idea to maybe eat, if you're gonna eat more carbohydrate heavy foods, do it like 2 or 3 days before. You don't want it sitting in your stomach for race day. Pick out your race clothes the night before. If you have any sort of like cool little race belts or something that you use, make sure it's all laid out. All your shoes are lined up and you're ready to go. Definitely know where you're going for packet pickup. I've been late before. That's a good idea. And I mean, you guys have all pretty much done the course, you know where we're at, so that hopefully should not be an issue for this race, but races that aren't here, yeah, definitely a good idea to kind of map quest it in advance. And turn it around.
So what to expect on the actual day. So any major race like this is going to have porta potties, so you don't need to worry about that, but you need to give yourself a lot of time to use the porta potties because there's likely going to be a line and you're going to end up using them more than you think. Sometimes the porta potties on the sides are actually not used as much for whatever reason. So if you go that way, or if you're a female, get in a line where there's a lot of males and you'll be able to use the porta potty a little quicker. A lot of times at races, there's not going to be water at the start line. So if you feel like you need water before, you should likely bring it. But you need to know where you're going to put it afterwards. So keep that in mind. There's likely going to be water at the end, just not the beginning. And I don't know if it will be the case this time, but in larger races, there's going to be paces set out by the side. So you need to line up a few minutes before at the pace you think that you're going to realistically run. So you should have a good idea of kind of what your typical pace is, and it'll maybe be a little bit faster than that. This race and most races now are chip time, so that means you don't need to try to, as soon as the gun goes off, run as fast as you can, because your time is not going to start until you cross the start line. And then we'll kind of talk about this a little bit more, but a dynamic warm-up is always a good idea before you do any kind of race. And I believe you guys might have seen these. I think Paul maybe already brought them once, but okay. We do have pamphlets that give some ideas of dynamic warm-ups. So some drills you can do after you run, or after you do your warm-up. So what do you do before the race? Yeah, so you have to consider chafing too, which is like a serious thing. So do think about that.
It's very serious. Aquaphor.
Yeah. So you do want to make sure that you warm up. So for a race like this, a 10-minute jog or like a brisk walk is probably appropriate. You do a dynamic warm-up, so some drills and Typically you'll do striders if you're gonna, if you wanna start racing hard at the beginning. So striders are just, probably 70 to 100 meter sprints where you're building up to maybe 75% of your max speed just to kind of get your body going. Pace yourself. The beginning part is not a sprint. You should feel pretty comfortable going through the first half mile to a mile in a 5K. You should be breathing hard, but probably able to hold a conversation, or at least talk, maybe not hold a conversation. And then always review the course beforehand. So if you do want to kick or kind of make your pace a little faster at the end, you don't do that too soon or too late. And also, sometimes volunteers aren't where they should be, so you don't get lost if you know the course.
But they'll be in the right spot for this race.
Yeah, this one will be perfect, but it can happen. So running etiquette. So we kind of talked about, so line up at the pace you think you're realistically going to run. So don't go to a pace that's too fast because people are going to have to pass you, but at the same time don't pick a pace that is too slow because then you have to pass a lot of people, and that can be problematic as well. This is my own thing, but minimize your headphone use. If you absolutely have to use headphones, do it in one ear so that you really can hear what's going on around you. Same thing in terms of the pace with the stroller. So if you're going to use a stroller, you need to make sure that it's allowed. Same with headphones, but start farther back in the line. Give a lot of space when you are passing someone. So kind of think of like you're a car, like you wouldn't cut right in front of someone. It's rude, it messes up their cadence, and you're asking for potential injury. If you like to spit or do snot rockets, which I think is gross, but if you do, just make sure that you're not right next to someone and you don't spit on them. And if you are gonna walk, totally fine, just make sure that if you're going from a walk or jog to a walk, that you kind of go off to the side before you stop or change your pace. In terms of water stations, if you choose to get water, try to throw it, the empty cup close to the trash can. So the volunteers are not there to chase your trash, so try to be polite. Also, it's never a bad thing to thank the volunteers as you run by. And then once you finish, don't just stop right at the line. Continue, even if you're really tired, to walk through the chute so you don't clog that up and again, kind of create chaos. Okay, so more The Office.
And in
I'll send it to you.
I can go back. Let me know what you're doing.
I'm a slow reader, so.
You good?
Okay.
Okay, so after the race. So even though you're really tired, you should do some kind of walk or jog afterwards for about 10 minutes, just so that you don't get the lactic acid buildup quite as bad. And you definitely need to make sure that you hydrate. So Lisa kind of already talked about this, but for a 5K, water is probably just fine for you to do in terms of you don't need to do heavy electrolytes. Also, making sure you eat something, but you don't gorge yourself after is also important. So typically protein and carbs, chocolate milk has the perfect combination, so that's always a good one to go to. And then I also encourage you to do some kind of activity the next day, even if it's minimal, again, to kind of flush out the lactic acid. Okay, so random things you need to think about. I don't know if this is going to be the case, if there's going to be a bag drop off.
I don't know about that.
Okay, so if there, you got to figure it out, because if there isn't, okay, there's not going to be. Then whatever you've got on, you got to carry with you. So think about that, or have a family member or friend that you can hand your stuff off to last minute, or there might be a safe location, I'm not sure. So wear your bib where they tell you to wear your bib. There's a reason they ask you to put it on that side of your body, so just do what is instructed of you. And then you guys know, because it's going to be here, but always consider where you need to park for races and how long it's going to take you to get to the start line. And then also factor in, again, the porta potties. And then already kind of touched on this with the socks. Don't wear new shoes the day of the race. I would suggest not wearing shoes that are, I'd probably wear shoes that are at least 2 weeks old of running, because you don't want to get blisters or toenail problems. So that's our references. You guys have questions about anything?
Doesn't have to be
You guys have
about
all
prep.
ran, yeah.
Training questions.
What should the intensity of like the last run you do before the race be?
Super easy. Like,
Super easy.
you should totally be able to carry on a conversation. If it's a 5K, I probably wouldn't go more than 1.5 miles. But then the striders, you're picking your pace up. You maybe do like
How
four
many
of
days
those.
before the race did you do your last run?
I mean,
you.
yeah, I think it's always a good idea to run the day before,
Yeah.
but easy, maybe a mile. If you're racing a 5K, I would run a mile. Like any race that you're participating in, it's always a good idea to take whatever the event is, swimming, biking, running, and just kind of cut everything way down to 10 minutes of that effort. Or of that sport, but at a very easy
And it's
effort,
fine.
slogging only.
Yeah. You can take the like 2 days before if you want to take a day off. I would suggest like 2 days before the race, take it off.
Yeah, you probably want to have moved the day before. Something easy within the 10-15 minute range max. If you cycle, you could always ride your bike for 15 or 20 minutes instead of running if you're concerned about running the day before. And I also would recommend not doing any heavy lifting. If you lift or have any strength training protocol, I would stop doing that at least 3 or 4 days before the race, so that doesn't really have an effect on your race day, and just focus on stretching during those 3 to 4 days. That's probably, yeah, that's what I'd say about that.
You need to start that now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Any questions about training?
Concept of carbo loading, because it's just, I've heard that my whole life. But that's more for longer races, or
Not
does
even
it just even
that.
matter? Like, has it kind of been like, that
You
was
just
it?
like sits and you just, I think they found that just like, yeah, they don't even suggest it now for
It was just an
longer
old
races.
concept, and now it's, because like, I'm doing a ketogenic diet, I'm thinking, well, should I even have any carbs? Because I try to reduce my carbs as much as I can anyways.
I think a lot of importance was placed on what you eat before, like the day before a while ago, and they're kind of finding that's not the case. Just don't eat a ton of junk food or things you
Yeah,
haven't
yeah.
eaten before, and you'll be just fine.
Yeah, anything that's like going to be highly inflammatory to your system, you probably don't want to have in your body the day before. Carbs being highly inflammatory, or at least, just sugars, processed sugars. That's probably, I would leave that out for 2 or 3 days if possible. And I mean, eat light carbs, like potatoes are great, but anything that's a more processed food, I'd probably stay away from the few days before the race and just stick to like plain food, like nothing that's gonna upset or irritate your system, and just try to keep inflammation as low as possible. So, high intensity intervals, that should be out 3 days before training, or 3 or 4 days before the race. Heavier lifting, alcohol, processed foods. Like if you really are trying to have a focus on having a PR and feeling really good, then that would be the most ideal way to do it.
And coffee. So some people do really well and they want to have coffee before the race, and some people it's a diuretic, so you have to consider that. So if you get a headache, if you don't have it, but
Half the amount, like
consider it.
I would maybe cut your, your 8-inch mug in half and just 8 ounce, and just have 4 ounces of coffee instead. And I mean, that should be more than enough to like curb any type of headache that you might have if you drink coffee every day, but not too much that you'd have to run to the porta potty an extra 2 or 3 times.
Is there any sort of stretching you should do?
So,
Great question.
yeah, it's kind of a loaded
We'll
question.
hand out our dynamic warm-up brochure,
Which you're in. So,
which these two star in.
So, one thing to keep in mind is research is kind of mixed on stretching. So, static versus this is dynamic stretching, they haven't found a huge difference and kind of changes in the muscle. However, this one's thought to kind of prep the system a little. The dynamic stretches are thought to kind of prep the system for exercise a little bit more than just static stretching. So, if you were to look into the research, that's kind of what they found.
You have one.
Any other questions?
This is for you.
Okay. I think we're good.
Thanks, guys. Good luck. Have fun. That's what it's all about.